Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for Xolo Talks Fall 5 already. Today we have Moritz, a customer of ours, as a guest. He will tell his story of being a young entrepreneur and the challenges and the perks of being a young entrepreneur. But before we meet Moritz, I'm gonna give you a quick overview of what Xolo is and what we do. So first question, what is Xolo? Xolo is an all-in-one solution that provides you all the tools to run your business remotely from anywhere in the world. We are everything combined for you: a company, bank account, accountant, and overall best friend in business. So if you have any questions in running your business, you can turn to us. We enable freelancers, contractors, and digital nomads around the world to start and run micro businesses in a hassle-free way. We have two products for that. We have Leap, which is in partnership with Estonian e-residency. This is a full company setup where you will be the owner. We provide the accounting, all the setup, the company registration, bank registration, and everyday support in your business questions. We also have our own platform from which you can issue easily invoices from, mark up all your business expenses, and have overall overview of your incomes and expenses. Then our other product is Go, which is a virtual company with pay-as-you-go pricing. You can set it up in 5 minutes. You don't need to have anything besides your own personal identification card. You can start invoicing immediately. And this is in partnership with Xolo. So you will enter a partnership with our company and you will invoice under our name. But you can start invoicing as quickly as needed. And you will also get a dedicated bank account and also an expense overview, and you can pay all your company expenses from there. So you can run business from anywhere in the world with Xolo. Everything can be done online. You have our dedicated customer support getting you through in everything that is needed to run your company, and you can just concentrate on growing your own business. You don't have to worry about any of the admin parts. Just a quick overview, what is Xolo in numbers? So currently there are over 70,000 e-residents from around the world, and they're from 100 different countries. The average age group is 26 to 35, and it's mostly male. Currently, we're trying to lure in some women there also. We have 2,700 Leap customers and over 1,200 active co-customers. And we've been in business for 5 years now. It's gonna be our anniversary year. So yeah. So if you have any more questions about Xolo, then contact us at xolo.io. You can email us directly at hello@xolo.io. So see you there. But now we're going to talk to Moritz and learn all about becoming a business consultant. So if we can get Moritz online here.
Hello, everybody.
Hey Moritz, I can hear you now. So yeah, this is Moritz. At the end of the talk, if you have any questions to Moritz, write them in the comment section in YouTube, and then we can ask them directly from Moritz. But hey Moritz, how are you today?
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you. So let's dive in. Tell us a little about yourself, just where you're from. Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, I'm 27 years old. I'm from Hamburg, Germany. Sometimes I like to joke that I'm a hamburger. I started my first company with Xolo 2.5 years ago, and haven't looked back. So the work that I do, I'm sure we're going to get into that in a second, but I've always been pretty international. For the past 6 years, I've worked abroad, and so the work from home situation that a lot of people face for the very first time now due to COVID is not something new to me. And so I feel very at home operating my company in that same way too.
Yeah, and I mean, let's just dive into it right away. Like, was your solo company your first company you started, or did you have a business anywhere else before?
No, this was actually the first company I started. Before then, I was always an employee. I did work for a cruise shipping company during my second study program that I also didn't complete. And I also worked for a blockchain startup in Berlin for 7 months. And it was during that time that I decided that I would set up my company with LeapIn, as it was formerly called back then. And so, yeah, that was Existential Ventures, OU. Which I ended up operating for about 2.5 or 2 quarter years from 2017 until late last year. And then I shut it down. But it was my first company, yes.
And what made you decide to become an entrepreneur instead of going to a 9-to-5 job? You said you worked 7 months for, sorry, what was it?
Blockchain startup.
Blockchain company, yes.
Yes. Well, I don't know. When I was a student, I realized that after reading a particular book called Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, a now famous writer, that for me, even though I am very analytical and I do enjoy the theoretical pursuits of philosophy and economics and those kind of things, I do want to learn from practical experience, not only from books. And so in that whole realization for myself that I want to learn from real world pursuits, that then naturally put me on a path to try and go as far as I can in working in the areas that I care about. And then at the beginning, that did entail working with other people, working as part of a greater group and as a quote unquote employee. Although back when I lived in Chile and participated in a learning and problem solving community called Exosphere, it was very much an entrepreneurial setting. We were multiple people working together, but each one of us had responsibilities where it was required of us to act entrepreneurially, even though we weren't, strictly speaking, the entrepreneur. And so in that context, I learned to think and act that way, as in doing things before you necessarily 100% know that they will work out. And that's what being an entrepreneur, I think, consists of a lot of the time, that it's better to act instead of constantly trying to figure out, okay, will this be the absolute best way of acting? Because if you act like that, then you will pass up a lot of opportunities. And then when I left that group and went back to Germany and looked around and found that job with a blockchain startup, I also went into that with a pretty entrepreneurial approach. I pitched myself not in the typical way with a CV and with like writing an email, but instead I created a pitch deck, basically a personal pitch deck, where I did like a visual explanation of how I think I could fit with the company and what my skills and strengths are and what kind of value I would like to create with them. And so this red thread of entrepreneurial action has been in my professional path for a long time. And Xolo then just was the obvious answer to sort of make that official and start doing my own business. And since then, I've worked with a number of companies, always in the sort of consultant or contractor role. So I wasn't, strictly speaking, entrepreneur in the sense that I created my company and then started to build a product or provide one service that I was selling directly to customers or companies. But instead, I did work with people in the sort of consultant role, and that's what I've been doing for ever since then. Yeah.
Oh, that's a long journey, but a very exciting one. So, yeah. So you already talked about like the process behind becoming an entrepreneur, but we haven't talked about like what you do. We like briefly mentioned that you do consulting, sure. But yeah, what is it exactly that you do?
Right. Well, it always changes, and it's actually a challenge to then capture it in a way that Xolo or also the bank that I just went to Talent for to register my bank account with, that they would accept, because I cannot always know exactly what I will be doing in advance of me doing it. But mainly it orients around finding people in the world that I think have something interesting to bring to the world. That could be a startup, it could be a technology, it could be a service, it could be a product, it could be a community. And then figuring out what stands in their way from making that happen. And I basically can do that because in my work with that learning and problem solving community down in Chile, I ended up creating a pretty large network of around 1,500 people from all over the world that were engaged in pursuits like technology, science, entrepreneurship, politics even. And so with that network, I constantly encounter new people that have some interesting ideas, that have some interesting visions. And then I just figure out what do they need. And then some of them, they have money to spare to spend on strategy or on communication or on writing. And so what I do changes all the time, but it does tend to revolve around basically making bridges between people, where people are right now with what they're trying to do and where they need to be.
Mm-hmm. So it is like, in like 2 words, it's business consulting.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But just a very differently like
the form changes a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But you mentioned that you were in that camp in Chile, right? And that's where you got like the initial skills to do that. But
yes, I would say so.
Yeah. So what else have you like studied? What's your educational background for this? Does it have any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have, after school, I didn't really know what to do. And so at first I basically did a bit of experimentation, being in different contexts, but ultimately I ended up deciding going to university. The first program that I did was philosophy and economics in Bayreuth in Germany. And a great program, still think it's a great one to attend, but ultimately that book that I just mentioned earlier ended up convincing me that I shouldn't stay in academia and that I would get too lost in theoretical castles in a sense. And so I quit and dropped out of that first study program after 1 semester and ended up enrolling in a dual study program called Maritime Management, which is basically a business degree with a focus on shipping and logistics. And it's a dual study program in that in Germany you can do this thing where you both study at a university and as well as work at a company. And so I did that also for 10 months, after which I dropped out again my second time, and then went to Chile to work with that group and to participate in their program. And that's basically my educational background in terms of, so strictly speaking, tertiary education. But ever since then, I basically have been on a constant learning path of learning things by myself, learning things with other people. And so that's what I do now. I'm a definitely self-directed learner.
Yeah, because nowadays it's like you have access to all kind of courses and
yes.
networks and everything. So it's like it's never been easier.
Yes.
to like
actually one of the most important educational investments I've made is this online course, Building a Second Brain, which taught me how to arrange all of my digital existence in a way where I use it consciously rather than just sort of be distracted by social media, be distracted by all these tools that entice us to act in not necessarily very smart ways. And I started to use note-taking tools to organize myself very systematically. And so that has helped me a lot. And I think it goes to show that today education can look very differently from the typical school to university to job path if you know how to do it yourself, or if you know how to find people who know how to do it and then work with them.
Yeah, exactly, connections. And then I think now we have a lot of like examples in the tech field and everywhere where people have not followed the conventional educational route, right? And then like self-learning is the way to go.
That's right. Even Google now, I think, requires of you just a $45 degree that they themselves allow you to take with them, which they think is equivalent to a Harvard education. So.
Pretty nice. So yeah. But when you started, let's go back into like the business part of it for a second. When you started, how did you start finding customers? Was it like you already like were in a network that you were able to start finding customers from, or did you have to start reaching out from like zero? Right.
So when I started the company, I didn't have a customer right away. I didn't start the company because I already had somebody. And so I did that to basically force myself to just get going. And that's oftentimes the most difficult step, to just go and start doing it. But then how I actually got my first customers was simply by providing value up front. And actually the one customer that ended up being the largest client for me for 2018 and 2019 was Xolo. So not Xolo, but Xolo, which is a sort of quote unquote blockchain company that I had found their technology quite interesting and had followed them for some years before then. And then when they brought out their first technology, holochain, I started writing about that and speaking about that on social media a lot. And so they became aware of my advocacy for the technology, and we started to become closer together. And then we figured out, okay, why don't I work with them and help them tell their story? And so that's how I ended up finding that first customer that then also ended up being my best one. And ever since then, I've basically found customers by simply being involved in online conversations, by helping friends. And I think that's also what I would recommend people who are wondering how to get started. It's less about necessarily finding a marketplace or knowing exactly what you're going to do or building that perfect website, but instead to find people who have something that they need, that you can help them do or that you can help provide to them. And then or even just helping friends. And then through you helping those people, they will remember you having been of help and then will refer to you either job adverts or gigs that they have access to. And so I would just say, get involved in the conversations, get involved in online communities, get involved in places where your skills might be in demand. And I think you'll have an easy time then at least getting the first contacts. And if you struggle with figuring out what these online spaces might be for you, feel free to get in contact with me and I'd be happy to point out some to you.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you right away now, is if there's some listeners listening in on us, if you have any places that you would recommend where they can find these kind of networks, or which websites do they visit and something just where to start from if they have no knowledge of this whatsoever.
Right. Well, of course, it very much depends on what kind of service you're offering. So, for example, if you offer a translation service, let's say, I have a friend who offers translation services, then you probably will find communities for that specific service on Facebook, for example, not exactly on Twitter. I think Twitter is not exactly a place where you can directly find communities because it doesn't have that sort of group feature. But Facebook tends to be quite helpful. LinkedIn, of course, too. I don't really use LinkedIn. But let's say you offer something that is a bit more, like not exactly as focused, I don't know, like me, for example, business consulting. Then I would just say, find people who already do what you're doing or what you want to do and ask them. Most people who do things and are successful at them, they got there because they were helpful to a lot of people, and so they tend to be interested in helping people who are a couple steps behind them in a sense.
Yeah, you have a very broad kind of customer base, as in like you're just following like ideas, not really like people per se, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly like I am in I don't know how many at this point, maybe in the hundreds of online communities, like on Discord, on Facebook, on Twitter, in other dedicated spaces. So I can't simply say like this is the place for you because it depends on you. But for me, it's also the result of about 6 or 7 years of pretty constant involving myself in these kind of conversations. And so it does take some work to get there. And it's also not necessarily the best way for you. If you offer, for example, coding as a service, as a software contracting, for example, then it might be the best for you to simply make your LinkedIn profile very well designed, and the recruiters will reach out to you and want to hire you pretty quickly. Like, for example, earlier this year, I myself participated in a web development bootcamp to learn programming for 3 months. And the people that organized that bootcamp told us at the end that simply if you have an up-to-date LinkedIn profile, or sort of in the German equivalent, a Xing profile, then the offers will start rolling in pretty quickly if you simply make yourself available and say you have certain skills, simply because software contracting is so much in demand.
And I mean, due to the corona crisis at the moment, traveling is not really in the plans, or it's like complicated at the moment. But you travel a lot.
Yeah.
You're a digital nomad. So how big of a part is in your travels networking and meeting with those people, or is it mostly online where you find your people?
Yeah, I mean, I do travel quite a bit. I did travel about 50 trips a year from 2018 to 2019 for 2 years. So that was a pretty crazy tempo to keep up. And it also took a toll on me. So don't get me wrong, like this traveling thing is not necessarily an extremely great thing if you don't know how to, let's say, stay healthy and engaged, and also stay in a place for a bit longer. I never actually set out to try and become a digital nomad. It just ended up happening that I had to be in certain places for work, for example, at conferences or meeting people for work sessions. And then also, of course, visiting friends, because I have friends all over the place. But if you don't have that big a network, or your work doesn't require you to be at a particular place, then I would definitely recommend staying in places a bit longer than just a week, maybe a month or 3 months or so, if you are interested in the digital nomad life. Because it does allow you to at least set up a routine, maybe have your favorite coffee place, maybe you also meet some people locally, and basically have a stable background for your work to actually take place. For me, it was definitely a huge challenge to balance the constant travel with the need to actually deliver results in my work as well. And so ultimately, it also took a toll on my physical health. And I ended up having a small burnout at the end of last year, which I then had to recover from for 6 months. And that's also the reason why I actually ended up shutting down my first company, to save money so that I could sort of take time to become healthy again. And then I opened up the second one just this summer.
So the work-life balance is very important, and I guess especially when you're like constantly traveling and you don't have like a home base, it's even going to take a harder toll on you.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's a lesson I've learned the hard way, and I hope that other people can learn it the soft way. And so I am now deciding that I will spend more time in fewer places. And so earlier this summer, I spent 3 months in Portugal, where my family owns a house. And that was very, very good for me, like having sun around, having a stable place to also work. And I think I'll be doing that much more going forward. I am traveling right now a little bit because, for example, for the new company that I set up with Xolo now, Operation Autark, I had to register a bank account, and for that I had to go to Tallinn, and I was there for 3 nights. And now I also am visiting a couple of friends or contacts that both I have business and friendship relationships with. And so once that is complete, though, and it will just be a couple, I'll be going back to that sort of staying in a place for 1 to 3 months or so.
Yeah. You mentioned briefly about closing down your first company.
Right.
And you already like mentioned the background of it, but can you like go more into detail about it? Like what brought this about, and how did it all work out, and when did you feel ready to get back on the saddle?
Right.
So to say.
Yeah, I did shut down the company for purely personal reasons. So Xolo, there was no problem with the provider. There was no problem with business also drying up necessarily. I had enough offers to continue working. So there was an offer for me to go to Armenia, for example, and do a little gig there. But still, I didn't end up taking them simply because I realized that as a solopreneur, you are the biggest bottleneck in your own success. And so if you don't take care of your own health and of your own well-being, then you will be unable to deliver the value that you promise to your customers. And so me having experienced this burnout from a lot of this travel and also from other reasons, I decided, okay, I have to take a step back, and I have to sort of manage my resources in a sense. And that's why I shut down the company. I could have just kept it open and it would probably have been fine. But because I wasn't sure how long it would take me to get better, I decided to shut down the company to save money, basically. And also because there wasn't... Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, because it kind of reduces the stress if you don't give yourself a deadline, right? And then you had like this open-ended like time.
Exactly, and like 100 euros a month isn't a lot of money to necessarily pay for a company provider. But at that time, I didn't have a lot of reserves to know what I would need the rest of the money for that this was drawing on, and so that's why I decided that. And also because I wasn't quite sure whether or not it was possible to suspend the company, for example, in a sort of hibernatory state, and so that was the only option that I saw.
And how did you feel ready to re-enter the business life, or when did you feel that you were able to continue what you have been doing before?
Right. So at some point during this recovery period, I realized that pretty early on, actually, that I did have this sort of insecurity on some deeper level that the services I provide require me to be valued by the people that I'm selling the services to, meaning that they don't have an independent, strong value outside of me as a person as well. So, I mean, of course, I could focus on communication, I could focus on speaking, I could focus on writing, but because I prefer to sort of be the one that does a little bit of everything, a generalist in a sense, oftentimes when I sell my services, I need to convince people that what I'm doing has value, and that requires a very personalized pitch. And so I decided to go into a web development bootcamp because that then gave me that sort of fundamental underlying security that if I needed to, if for some reason business was drying up in the other things that I do, I could always go back to coding, for example, as a very clearly marketable skill that has a market value that doesn't depend on me as a person. And so if I, for example, have another burnout or business doesn't work for a while, I can just offer my coding services, and I will probably find enough offers pretty quickly enough to sort of just have the income thing sorted.
Yeah, but talking about mental health, because it is a very big part of being a digital nomad or a solopreneur, because you are kind of on your own in that business sense, right? Is there anything that you learned from this burnout that you know that you're going to do differently, and some tips that you can share to other people to avoid getting into this kind of a situation?
Definitely. So I think the big one is that travel should be a bit slower than I practiced it. But another one is to seek out and to invest time and attention into being around other people that are living a relatively similar life. So this can take the form of participating in digital nomad residencies, or living together with a couple of friends for a couple months at a time, or maybe even just staying in a place as well. Like, you don't have to be a digital nomad to be a solopreneur. You can also simply have a place that you call home and work from home, and then travel if you want to. But I think it's very, very important to find people around you, physically around you, that you can have ongoing relationships with, and that go beyond the sort of superficial meeting each other at a party or at a cafe or somewhere else, or just at a meetup. I'm saying, like, those are definitely valuable things as well, but being the sort of solo warrior in a sense does take a toll if you're not careful to continue having like relationships also outside of work. So it's very easy, especially if you're not used to managing your own time, and also sort of leaving work be work, and also having some fun in other parts of your time. It's very easy to fall into this default state of always working, because there's nobody else telling you, okay, now the day is over. And so if people call you at night, or if you like have this one thing to quickly still send off in an email, like, you can easily work until late at night or even start in the morning. And especially if you work with people from multiple time zones, it can be very difficult to make sure that you get enough sleep, or you get enough sleep on the right schedule. So for me, for example, I work a lot with Americans. And so they are always sort of backshifted in time. And so when I get up in the morning, I don't have those people up yet, which is great. But in the evening, when I am sort of winding down, they're sort of just in the middle of their workday. And so a lot of the calls that I am asked to be on will take place in the evening or late evening. And so sometimes I just have to set boundaries and say, okay, no more calls after, let's say, 10 p.m., because I also need to make sure that my sleep isn't completely erratic. And yeah, those are some of the things that I would say set up clear boundaries and then communicate well with your clients, and also set expectations very early on in the relationship.
I think the boundaries is a very important part, and I don't know, you have been running your business for quite a while now. Can you say that actually setting those boundaries means you're not going to lose the customer? Because a lot of people, I guess, feel at the beginning that they need to kind of accommodate to all the requests, otherwise they're like afraid of losing the customer.
Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where you grow as you go. So at the beginning, you'll probably want to err on the side of being maximally available, simply because you're not very confident in your own ability to like communicate and structure a relationship with a client in a way that allows you to also like keep those healthy dynamics. But as you get more experience and as you complete more projects, I think it becomes very important to also sort of up level your own ability to structure those relationships up front. So as your skills become more proficient and as you build up a portfolio of clients and of work, that should be communicating to your client that you know what you're doing, right? And so as you have a strong portfolio and as you can clearly show that your services have value, I think you earn the right to also talk with the client in a way where you say, look, I know what I'm doing. I know how to provide value. Here's all the clients that I've worked past. Here's all the work that I've done. In order for me to do the best that I can, in order to provide the maximal value to you, I will need these kind of things to be the case in our relationship, so that I can do the most with the fewest hours. And oftentimes, especially if you're being paid in hours, it will be in the interest of your client that you spend the least hours as possible. And so if you can show and confidently communicate to your client that if you have a certain structure to your work, that you will be performing better, then they will see the point of agreeing to your expectations, or at least to your suggestions, or at least find a compromise between what you would ideally like to have be true and what they need from you.
Yeah, exactly. So going back, like what we already talked about, that life-work balance, but how is it running your business from like online from anywhere in the world? Let's talk about like the technical part of it. How much time do you have to spend on doing things that are not related to your core work, but like admin stuff and these kind of things?
Yeah, good question. I don't count it, but from what I sort of can guess, it's so let's see what kind of stuff the admin work actually consists of. So one, for example, would be to upload expenses, for example, for travel, for accommodation, for those kind of things. That would probably take me, depending, of course, how much I travel. Right now I'm traveling again, so it is a bigger chunk. It can take me like, I don't know, maybe an hour a week or so. But that's not a lot. It's also the reason for that being low is because I know how to organize myself in a way where I don't do it every single time that I have an expense I uploaded, but I sort of gather them for a week, let's say, and then I upload them all in one go. So there are all of these little tricks and hacks that you start to learn when you do this a bit more, that will reduce the time that you spend on these kind of things. But for that, Xolo itself is very helpful because I don't have to deal with that myself a lot. I just basically have to upload it, and then whatever needs to happen with that, I get told and I get shown in the interface. And so I think also the quote that I gave you guys for the website said that quite well. So that I don't know exactly what I said, but I said I love having a dashboard for every aspect of my company. Like I can see my expenses, I can see my income, I can see the business trips even. I think you didn't mention that in the opening, but one beautiful thing is that I can upload the business trips, basically say, okay, this is where I'm going to be, this is what I'm going to do. And then all the expenses are automatically categorized underneath that if I upload them for that trip. And so for me, it's kind of like you know how when you're doing a diet and you use a scale to measure how much you weigh, it's sort of like that for me with the business. Like you see how well you're doing in one view, whereas if you use many different services, or even if you do your accounting or your admin yourself, you'll have to switch a lot between a lot of different tools. And that tends to take a lot more time. It tends to take a lot of distraction. And so for me, that is really the prime benefit. And just the peace of mind that I have from knowing I have somebody to ask for. I have somebody to ask the questions that are on my mind, and I don't have to research them. And so I think that is actually the prime value of Xolo, that I don't need to worry about that. So I really like this term that you used earlier, your best friend in business or something like that, because that really is the way that I think about it.
Yay! Great to hear. Yeah. But you being, I already see there are a lot of few questions on the side about like taxation. Yeah. We don't have to go into that because we cannot give out like taxation advice or anything, but I'm just meaning like how hard is it to be a digital nomad, because you're from Germany originally and you're like traveling around. Is that like do we help enough with this? Do you need some outside help to deal with the taxes? Like how does it work? Like, well, I don't know, amount-wise.
I think Xolo gives enough basic information for you to make an informed choice about what the impacts of your traveling will be on you and on your tax situations. But ultimately, you need to figure out yourself how you want to structure your life, and it's your responsibility to decide, okay, it's beneficial for me to be resident in Germany or be a resident in another country or whatever it may be. For me, for example, I have been a resident in Germany for all of my life, and that might be changing soon. I'm still currently deciding that question. I might be actually registering in Portugal. But during that time, also to talk about the tax stuff, my income never went above the threshold in Germany to require taxes, simply because I was traveling so much that my expenses for accommodation and for other things always exceeded, not exceeded, but were high enough that a lot of the time my income was lower than the required amount. So, but yeah, that's something that you should think of as a larger question in life than just something you ask Xolo, okay, what should I do, or what is the impact? It's something that you have to figure out for yourself.
Have you, like, just to give like proper advice to people, have you consulted any like tax advisors, tax consultants, or have you just done your decisions based on what you found online and on your research?
Right. No, I have never hired an attorney or lawyer for any of these things. I tend to, I would hire somebody for that if I think I needed them. But for now, I've been confident in my own ability to research this information online and to trust the right sources, as well as to find people in my network or in my friends who either are in a similar or the same situation, and then just ask them how they do it. So that's actually what I'm doing right now. I'm asking around. I'm also looking at online sources. I found this one blog that talks in very detailed language about what the choice to unregister in Germany entails on a legal, financial, tax, and so on implications. And so I think I'm going to be good with that. But I do recommend to you, if you're not 100% sure, to definitely ask somebody with the right expertise.
We actually have a question from one of our listeners, Sergey, that I think goes well with what we talked about before, being like a solopreneur and finding customers. He's asking you, can you reach big clients being a solopreneur, or do you face some barrier, like big guys don't want to work with a single person company? Is there like an issue in this?
Not for me, simply because the work that I do doesn't require, like, let's say, some extremely good branding or some very polished appearance on the web. For me, the way that I communicate my value to my clients is through direct relationships. That might not be true for you. If you're, for example, somebody selling a product or selling a sort of digital service, let's say, where you don't have a direct relationship with your customer, but they just find your value online or your service online, you might need actually a much more professional appearance on the web. You might need the sort of, let's say, air of respectability that comes with seeming like a very full-blown company. But for that, I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
No, it makes sense, because your business is very your brand, and you, as you said,
Yes.
you have a very like personalized pitch every time, and yeah, it's different to like provide this anonymous product or something out there that people want to know the background of.
But I do know people who use Xolo and who do a sort of more generalized market offering, and so they seem to have no problems as well. I think that people who there is a sort of generational divide, I would say, between people who are older than, let's say, 35 and the ones that are younger than that, where for them, they don't even know what it means to work from home. They don't even know what it means to like sort of grow up in a digital first environment. And so for them, anything that's just online and not physical has always this sense of suspicion for them. I definitely see it in my parents as well. Like my parents are like I think around 63 or so. And this year was the first year that my father, who has worked at the same company for more than 30 years, has had to work from home for an extended period of time. And it was quite an, let's say, illumination for him to see, okay, this is how you work, Moritz. This is how you operate. And now I'm learning that too. And now his bosses are also learning that for the very first time. And I think now that COVID has sort of changed the game a bit, that working from home is much more normalized, or at least it is at least justifiable to ask for it if you are doubtful about your health. I think that it will become much easier now to say, okay, online first is okay. You don't need to have a physical address. You don't need to be somebody with a head office. But it is a fight. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, yeah, I think it is shifting now. It used to be like dodgy online business without any physical presence to tie it down. Even though we advertise ourselves as fully like online company, we still have like, not now obviously, but when they can travel, customers coming into our office like every week because they just want to make sure that we're here and we're like a legitimate thing, and they want to touch us. They're like, you're real. I can trust you with my company and my accounts, you know, and these kind of things. So there, yeah, it's a different mindset, but I think it is shifting. Yeah. So I'm gonna see if we have any other questions here from customers. Dorian is asking, okay, there's a lot of tax talk, but we're not going to go into tax questions because we like overall went through it. And if you have any specific ones, then you can contact us directly with the tax questions at hello@xolo.io. And then we can like, because every case is different, and we can go through it together. Then Sergey is asking you, he's thanking you for sharing your story. Any advice on how to stay productive over a long period of time? Do you practice time management, for example? You mentioned that briefly. Do you spend much time planning the next steps in business?
That's a very good question. Yeah, very good question. My thinking on that changes quite a bit on an ongoing basis. Like so I would say I have sort of seasons in my productivity, meaning that sometimes because of my work being more, let's say, divergent or open, and sometimes it being much more focused, depending on the clients that I work with and the projects that I have, it requires a very clear adaptability from me. So sometimes when I have a project where, for example, I take on a leadership role and I'm organizing other people, for example, then I will have to manage my time very clearly. I will, for example, have to see, okay, what do I need to do for the week? What will I need to get done in that time? When do I need to get up? Maybe get up every day at the same time, have a very clear routine, be in one place. And then I will be more strict with myself as well. A lot of the time, though, I also have this more divergent mode where I work with a bunch of projects. The nature of my involvement will be less creating a clear deliverable and more, for example, doing sort of the in-between work, like making connections between people or introducing people to new ideas or developing a strategy in conversations. And so that then is a much more fluid mode of operations where I tend to be a lot on my phone and less on my computer. And I tend to, like, I can travel much more easily. And so it really depends on what the nature of your work is. If you, for example, somebody who has to put in a lot of deep work, let's say, for example, focusing on creating a translation of a particular text, then I would definitely recommend to set aside blocks of time, let's say 3 hours or so, or in 2 of that maybe in a workday, and then to really spend the time focusing on that, maybe even use something like a Pomodoro timer where you do 25 minutes of work and 5 minutes of a break. And so, yeah, it really depends on the nature of your work. But if you're wondering about how to do that, I'd be happy to compare notes privately or personally if you're interested.
Yeah, I don't. We've shared in our emails and in our ads about this talk Moritz's website also. It's linked there, so you can reach him there. And otherwise, Moritz, if you want, you can share your social media handles now, and then.
Yeah. So the best way to get in touch with me by email is for Moritz Bierling, so my first and last name, at hey.com, hey.com. And then my social media all have the handle of Bierling M, so my last name and then the first initial of my first name. And yeah, I'm very active on virtually all of those media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn I look into once in a while, Discord too. And yeah, just reach out and I'd be happy to talk with you.
Yeah, that's great that you're so open to like networking and everything, because you're like, we have like 2 types of customers. There's one type that's like you, very like networky, out there, social, like digital nomad lifestyle. And then there's this other type who are just like very introverted on their own, just doing their work, and they're more like developer kind of types. So
it's funny, I'm also introverted, but I sort of have trained myself to be social too. And I do like connecting with a lot of different people. But yes, I appreciate both of those modes. I do need my time alone from time to time.
Yeah, who doesn't, right? But that's one of the things that was told to me. I was like, I am not extroverted. I'm always so tired after each interaction. And they were like, no, but you don't understand. You just spoke to like 50 people and you're tired. I do that with 1 and I'm dead. So, so they were like, that's really like really being introverted. And then, yeah, then I understood it. Yeah. But we're gonna wrap up now. I just wanted to like go through the things that we talked about, because you did bring out a lot of very like, I don't know, for me, interesting points that don't often get discussed or talked about when people discuss like digital nomad lifestyle or, you know, solopreneur lifestyle.
Right.
Also, you gave very good advice about how to get started. So if we can like sum up of some of these things, so it'd be good, how to get started, like the first things that you should look out for or know about.
Yeah, so if you're looking to get started as a young entrepreneur or solopreneur or however you want to call it, I would say figure out what you want to do. Write a little bit of a I don't know, maybe not an essay, but some kind of text. Go through a little bit of a period to really think, why are you trying to do that, so that you're clear on why this is important to you. And I think that will serve you well to then also keep reminding you when you come into the inevitable challenges of cash flow problems and of clients jumping off and of all kinds of other problems. And then I think definitely reach out to people who want to help or who are already a couple steps further along the way, and get involved in conversations that are tangential to what you're interested in doing, without necessarily the direct expectation that those will pay off in terms of clients, but start providing value even without pay at the beginning, if you're sort of a service provider. For me, I love to help people, and I love to help people before I know that I'm going to get paid for that. And the beautiful thing of helping people is that then in their mind, they remember that you helped them. And then when they find something that they think, oh, Moritz would be great at that, then they'll tell you about it and you will get maybe a client out of that. So there is definitely, so this one hand washes the other dynamic, and karma does come around.
Yeah, I think it's like very good advice that you just gave to like actually articulate what you're planning to do, because a lot of people get into it and they have like a vague idea of the area that they want to work in, but you really need to know like what differentiates you from others and what is that you want to do, so you don't end up doing things that you don't like, so you don't get happiness out of it. So it's very
That's right. I would add one more thing actually, and that is you can register your company before you quit your job. So if you're already working in a company and you're a regular employee and perhaps you're curious about starting your own business, just go ahead and register a Xolo Go company. It's 5 minutes and you're operational if you want to be. And then you can try and find your first clients while you're still working. And maybe if you have success in finding your first clients, then you might ask at your work, depending on what it is, of course, that you're working, to like reduce your hours, for example, and sort of slowly phase into it. I definitely advocate this idea of the barbell strategy, meaning that you have a source of income that is very reliable and very clear, and then doing a little bit more experimental work to try and figure out the other stuff that you're trying to get to, but that you're not quite at. So I definitely recommend playing sort of both sides.
Yeah, it's a very good advice, because I feel people often think that they have to do one or the other thing, right? But you can do two things at the same time, and you can like slowly ease into it. It doesn't put that much pressure on you then. And
right.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to say as a wrap up to finish this up? Like any last words, ideas?
Yeah, I would just say, figure out what you want to do. Get in touch with me. I'll be happy to help you and connect you to people that I know might need what you want to do or what you want to provide, and just get started. It really, there's very little downside, and if you fail along the way, you'll learn and you'll probably get better. And ask other people to help you. That's actually one of the biggest challenges that people have. They don't ask for help enough because they think they have to do everything themselves.
Yeah, it's important to not to be afraid to ask help, because this is how we get further. If we do it alone, then all the pressure is on you and you're gonna break. But if we do it all together, then we're gonna get further together. Right. Yeah, thank you so much, Moritz. This was really great. Thank you for being so honest and sharing your personal story. Also, your advice was very helpful, very practical. So always happy to have you around. Yeah. Hopefully we're going to see each other also in person. So,
definitely.
Yeah. And thank you everyone who joined us on YouTube or on Facebook watching this live. This video will also be available later for rewatch internally. So just follow up whenever. But yeah, so this is a goodbye from us. Ciao, Moritz. Thank you for spending this hour with us. And thank you everyone for joining. Ciao.